You are listening to the Enormocast.
Look, folks, we all know that ice climbing is a miserable, cold endeavor, punctuated by small spikes of joy, mostly when it's over. But if you're planning on heading to the famous ice park in Ouray, Colorado, to climb out your self-loathing, why not up the joy ratio by staying in the Wiesbaden Hotel and Spa? Imagine, after your third round of screaming barfies, you can retire to their vapor cave and soaking pool for a, quote,
strange, dark, steamy underworld soaking experience.
The Wiesbaden is affordable luxury in Ouray. In fact, if you climb in Ouray and don't stay there, you are totally blowing it. Discounts all winter. Go to wiesbadenhotsprings.com for more information. It's really the only way you'll find me ice climbing. Does your partner suffer from try-it-again syndrome? Or one-hangitis? Or even worse, delusional performance disorder? Well, there really isn't a cure for DPD, except for a good smackdown. But it does probably mean that you've been belaying them for hours and hours on end, and are now suffering from BNP, or belayer neck pain, a stiffness in the cervical spine just below the occipital region of your thick skull. But now there's a cure for BNP resulting from DPD. Ask your doctor about belay specs, and when he doesn't know what the hell you're talking about, just smile and tuck that prescription for opiates away for your next overseas plane flight. But then ask several strangers about belay specs. Ask that cute barista at the coffee shop on the corner about belay specs. In fact, ask everyone you know about belay specs. Keep talking about belay specs until nobody wants to climb with you anyway. Problem solved. But if that doesn't work, then go to belayspecs.com and get yourself a pair. And don't forget to enter Enormocast at checkout for a discount and to help out the podcast. Side effects may include people thinking you're staring at them when you're not, old trad climbers rolling their eyes, people putting them on for the first time and saying, ooh, that's trippy, people insisting they don't like those weird glasses even though they've never even tried them. If you feel drowsy, nauseous, or rumbling in your stomach, horny, confused, or have strange, vivid dreams, this probably has nothing to do with belay specs. It is more likely from that bug you picked up in that backpacker's hostel in Rio after 5 too many caipirinhas. Belayspecs.com. Say adios to belayer neck pain.
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000
seats.
We really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is February 5th, 2016, about 9:30 Mountain Standard Time, winter time. This is episode 98 of the Enormocast, rolling into triple digits. A conversation with Eric Barnard. Who's Eric Barnard? Well, you're going to find out. But some of the upper Midwest listeners just perked up. And maybe some folks from Pocatello. So we're pretty hunkered down here at the Enormocast midwinter. It's not been a good rock climbing winter, as it often is around Carbondale. It's been pretty cold here, and not getting a ton of sunny days to get out on the rock, which is usually a nice feature about this place. Ice climbers are stoked, skiers are stoked, rock climbers not that stoked. The only small bit of business I want to mention is that my major sponsor, underwriter, supporter of the show, Black Diamond, does have a recall that just came out yesterday for some carabiners and some slings. You definitely want to get online and check that out. It's all over Facebook. They've got a little inspection process you can go through to check out if there's some problems with a few pieces of gear within certain serial numbers. So go check that out at blackdiamondequipment.com. I want to get that out there. And I think that's pretty much it for business. So let's get to the interview with Mr. Barnard. I got a couple requests to have this guy on the show and kind of ran it down. I get a lot of requests for certain people, and I have a big master list. And once they get on my sort of list and interest level, I just kind of keep an eye out for a possibility to meet up with them, as I still do all these face-to-face. And I was back in Wisconsin for Christmas, because that's where I'm from. I was born in Green Bay. My folks live up there, retired back to that area, and I realized that, I don't give a lot of love to the Midwest or the upper Midwest. So I thought it was time to track this guy down. He lives over in Winona, Minnesota. So I got in a car, drove over there, found Winona, which we'll talk about in the podcast, and sat down with Eric. Incidentally, and also to show just how hard I work for you people, is I got back in the car after the interview and drove back to Green Bay across northern Wisconsin through one of the most horrendous driving situations I've been in quite some time. Luckily, I was driving my mother's nearly pristine, but something like 15-year-old Jeep Liberty. It's a classic, grandma car that never gets driven. So it's got 50,000 miles on it after that many years. Anyway, luckily driving the four-wheel drive, because Google sent me off on some really back road county roads, and I ended up just making first tracks through 8 inches of snow in this full-on blizzard. And then finally when I got back on the highway, it was just full-on Armageddon, where just every couple miles there was a car off the road. There were these huge jackknife trucks on these overpasses and on exits and everything else. And I finally got back home after 7 hours driving. So anyway, I just wanted to put that in there. This is for real, folks. The lengths the Enormocast goes to get you these interviews. Yeah, boo-hoo. Whatever, Caloose. Just give us our fucking interview. So back to Eric. Eric also fits that bill. I get a lot of requests for the everyman. And he'll tell you that he is an everyman. Although once you're done with the interview, you realize that there's probably no such thing as an everyman or every woman climber. Everybody's got a story, it seems like. And yeah, I do get a lot of requests to have those folks on the show. But, there always has to be an angle. I feel like I need a little bit of an angle. And Eric's contribution to the climbing community in Winona, his contribution back a little earlier at Devil's Lake, and the fact that he has gathered some folks together and are actually building an ice park in Winona, Minnesota. Midwest Ice Park, another one. There's a couple, I think, in, at least one in Minnesota. And he's trying to kind of build on a blueprint for taking a little town with some cool resources and trying to up the outdoor activity, up the outdoor tourism, and as he says, build some climbing, because that's what he wants. He's married, has 3 kids, is pretty much settled into Winona, and decided, there's not a lot of climbing around right now, I'm going to build some. So that's kind of his story, and I hope you guys enjoy that. And another kind of announcement, I haven't really mentioned this on the show, is that the Enormocast world is about to change in and of itself, because myself and my girlfriend are expecting an Enormo baby, a little boy, in March. So this is a major life-changing thing. Obviously, it's going to change my climbing. It's going to change my life. It's probably going to change the Enormocast a little bit. So we'll see what happens. Bumpy road. I think I'll be able to keep this thing going. But Eric had a lot of really great things to say about being a climber with a family, being a climber with 3 little boys, what that means to him, what that means to them. So this was a very interesting podcast for me to try to glean some information, some actionable intel, as it were. So that's the big announcement. Baby coming. Enormo baby. Yeah. Hopefully not that enormous for my girlfriend's sake. Okay. The upper Midwest is known for its farming community. So it was good to talk to a climber who's also a bit of an ice farmer himself. Just talked to him this morning. Called him up for a little bit more information about what we talked about. And he answered the phone. I said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to start the water on the ice park." So they're just getting it in. It's kind of a trial run this year. He said he has 18 spigots, so I don't know how many ice climb that's going to be, but it's getting it going. Winona, Minnesota. Buy your house now. Move there. It's going to be a huge climbing community in the next decade.
I do a lot of bullshitting, man.
Well, that's fine. If you've listened, then it's totally fine.
I'm just like, so people finally just give me money to just stop coming to their offices,
Yeah. Well, then you were made for this podcast. So I'm just going to start by asking you about this ice park thing that you're working on here in Winona.
Yeah.
Winona, Minnesota is going to become an ice climbing mecca.
I don't know if we need to throw that word out there yet. It will become an ice climbing place for sure. It goes back to if you don't have the things that make you happy around you, you can either travel to them or you can create them. And so, having 3 kids and a family and a career, I don't get to leave as much as I used to be able to. So just started looking around and thinking, well, why not run some water? We have large cliffs here, steep hillsides. We could actually make something that would be pretty inspiring to have right in our backyard. And I don't care who you are. I mean, if you can drive 5 minutes and go climb a pitch of ice, all of a sudden that town's looking kind of nice.
Right.
So it definitely was selfish motivations for sure.
Well, when did you sort of come up with the idea, or maybe more importantly, think it was possible?
I've been to Ouray and the ice park there before. I'd worked there a couple years too, and climbed there and saw what they were doing. They were in a unique situation with a canyon and stuff, but what really inspired me here was seeing what the Minnesota Climbers Association was doing up in Sandstone, Minnesota, and they took an old quarry that used to have some natural seepage and people could climb it under the radar and that, and they got organized and went to the city council and said, listen, if we run some water here, this could actually be something that people would come and want to do and maybe spend money in your town. And they embraced it, and it's been a huge success. And seeing really kind of the ease of it inspired us to think about doing it around here. Last year we did a pilot project. We had a private landowner with a big cliff right off his house in town let us run some water as an experiment, and it was really easy. And we had 4 100-foot pillars, 500 feet right above our town. Right. And all of a sudden it was like, hey, I've got 45 minutes. You want to go get a pitch in? And all of a sudden I felt like I'm living in kind of a cool town all of a sudden.
Right. Well, I'm going to describe it a little bit because we're sitting in the Midwest, and I asked Eric to come on the show because he's a Midwest guy, although he's lived out west, which we'll talk about in just a minute. He made the weird opposite migration. But, I've been wanting to kind of get, more regions involved in the Enormocast, so I found this opportunity to somehow get my ass to Winona, which doesn't need to be explained on here necessarily, but it's hardcore. A little strange that I'm here.
You're hardcore.
And it's like, I got to drive 4 hours tonight, and it's dumping out right now. But anyway, as I came across Wisconsin, mid-state Wisconsin, it's flat, it's super flat, and, right before the river, you start to see hills, and I was kind of thinking, because you had told me on the phone, like, hey, there's cliffs, there really are cliffs here, and we're working on it, and we got this ice park idea and stuff. Yeah. And I'm just this guy from Colorado, rolling my eyes, like it's gonna be some road cut, with some ice running down it, which you actually have, by the way. I saw a couple ice flows on those, but then you hit some hills, and actually there's some cliffs visible from the river, and we're on the Mississippi River.
Right on the Mississippi River.
And it's huge here already. Yeah. It's not like we're up by where somewhere it must be a trickle. Yeah. But so you've got this landscape that, it kind of has almost a Black Hillsy look to it, or even down in Kentucky and stuff, these wooded hillsides with these cliffs around. Yeah. And so I started to be like, oh, okay, I get it. And not only the climbing, but the outdoor recreation in general. Yeah, it's growing. Because, even my limited mountain biking experience, these kind of sort of rolling wooded hills, I think, would appear to make a lot more enjoyable mountain biking than like steep rocky things like we have in Colorado.
Yeah, easier trail building and lots of climbing and lots of good, actually really good riding.
Yeah, so I sort of got on board when I arrived here in town.
Cool.
And saw some cliffs, and you've even got this little pinnacle thing.
Yeah, the Sugarloaf.
Town.
Yep.
Is that what that's called?
Yeah, it's a rock tower. It's like 600 feet above town.
Yeah.
100-foot little mini like Devil's Tower thing or whatever.
Right.
That's kind of cool.
And there's climbs on it?
Yeah. There's I just kind of really have developed it just in the last year, mainly beginner climbs. But I think there's maybe 15 routes up on it.
So you let's go back to you're talking about the ice park. So you got these folks to let you make some ice on their walls.
Yeah.
And I mean, I imagine it's not that hard because it's cold here.
Yeah.
For a big chunk of the year.
It was super easy, and it was fat. And we put LED rope lights in it because it gets dark here early. And so even if it was dark, we can go climb. And it illuminated the ice fall so much that you didn't need headlamps. And
so you've
climbing
got LED
on it was rad because it was almost like you were in a dream world the first couple times we did it. It was wild. And you didn't need headlamps. And it actually was crazy because it illuminated the ice fall so much that it was almost no difference in like your technical climbing between day and night. You know, if you go rock climbing with a headlamp on, that's considerably harder.
Right.
You know, but this was just like, it was a glowing icicle that you were climbing. It was great.
Nice.
You know? And then it looked cool from town because you could see it from everywhere.
And what did this landowner or this person, what was his or her stake in it? They just were friends of yours? Or
no, not at all. And we've had a really good run with private landowners. So Minnesota is a really awesome state. So private landowners, there's a recreational statute in Minnesota that says as long as the landowner doesn't charge any money, they have zero liability, whether they know or don't know. Unless the landowner has malicious intent, they have no liability. And there's already been legal precedent set. So we had a friend who was a lawyer and a climber. And we got the statute out, and I approached the landowner and said, listen, like, we just want to do this. It's like almost gathering data so that we can go to the city and say we want to do this on city property. And in return, what we'll do is come in the spring and we'll bring like 30 or 40 folks for a weekend, and we'll do some work on your property. You know, you need wood chopped, you need that gravel pile moved, whatever. And he was like, okay, as long as there's no liability, this sounds cool. Okay. And so we did some work over the winter, like moving some stuff around, and he let us run the water. And he vacations in Arizona, so he was gone. Okay. And it was crazy because like you park in his driveway, and we walked down a spiral staircase on his back of his deck, and we just had static line in the trees for like master points, and you just wrapped off, and there's the ice. It was super convenient. It's not going to be that way anymore, but it was, you know. So it was great. We got to kind of see what happened to the ice when it melts. That was a concern of the city. Like they thought it was going to be this big waterfall and wash the hillside away.
Yeah, or big chunks of ice rolling down. And
I got geologists from the university to kind of study the soil and all that, and how like porous it is and the absorption rate, and then they taught us about ice creating its own microclimate and how it really just evaporates, and that's what it did. So we had that data to go to the city and say it's not going to hurt the land really. Right. So yeah, we just did work for him, and he was down with it.
And that was last winter?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So then you've sort of laid some groundwork, and we talked a little bit when I got here about how you've got this relationship with the city that's like, I mean, I've never heard of quite like as amicable as it sounds with sort of city officials, and it's ironic that would happen in a place like Winona, Minnesota, where you know, I guess people have heard about climbing now thanks to kind of the extreme sports boom, but I've always found that one of the big problems anywhere is when you bring climbing or you talk to people about climbing, they have just these weird concepts about it, and their general notion is to be like, no, that's too weird. It's too dangerous. People are going to die. We're going to have all these problems.
It's a liability.
Yeah,
that's the quote you hear all the time.
Yeah. So instead, you've gotten at least some buy-in so far.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, they're totally on board. You know, having city officials, our mayor, you know, saying if you can find climbing on city property, like please develop it. You know, and we've taken them up to the climbing areas and shown them what fixed anchors are, and we've come up with, you know, a fixed anchor application, and really the big thing that we're trying to do is get it all out on the table.
Right.
You know, we're no longer hiding behind the scenes. We are a legitimate user group. We care about the land. We're going to take care of it. We're going to be organized and pick it up and add features. We'll raise funds for trails and things like that. And they're starting to see us like, wow, these guys are really helpful for managing, you know, and giving us input of how we can be better and develop that outdoor recreation economy. And so it's really been an amazing thing to see that these people, for the most part, are not outdoorsy people.
Right.
You know, our mayor is not a physically active man.
Right. Just the Midwest. There's a little bit of a...
Yeah. So it's been really cool, and just trying to leverage, you know, our user group as a means to really add something to the city.
Right.
And they're all in.
That's so cool.
It's really cool.
Well, what's this site look like? You were just saying that you might have to run how much piping to get up there?
We're going to run at least 1,000 feet. Once we finish phase 2 next year, it'll be about 2,000 feet of hose and pipe that we'll be running out to the site. It's a ravine, like a little mini canyon, and then it has extremely steep hillside above it too. Steep enough hillside that when we go around and look at the area, we use ropes to rappel and ascend back up. So, which makes good like grade 2, grade 3 ice if you run water over it. It has little rock bulges. And then there's rock cliffs. There's 100-foot rock cliffs that will have free hanging daggers and stuff coming off of them, and pillars and all that. So I really want to try to develop a little bit though of some kind of alpine-esque climbing to get those new people into leading. It's really hard if you go to an area and everything's grade 5 to learn how to lead ice.
Right.
So having some good cruisers so people can learn how to play screws and build belays and all that, then that transcends if they want to go out west. So it's both something for us here, but then it gets us, dialed so that we can make the most out of our trips when we go to places like Cody or, Colorado and stuff.
So give me a guess on what you think the size of the native ice climbing scene is in Winona right now. Or am I like gonna mess with your numbers that you're gonna bring to the city later on?
So
you've sold them that there were thousands of them here.
No, not at all.
Every other household right next to their shotgun is a pair of ice tools. So
no, and I haven't tried to fool them at all. I've actually done the opposite. And we have a small population of people who like climbing ice, who have climbed for a while in our town. Surrounding towns, there's more for sure. But the thing is that if you're an ice climber, and if you're especially an ice climber in the Midwest, I mean, we all know the gear's expensive.
Sure.
It's $500 for a pair of boots. One Nomic ice axe is $299. If you're buying retail, it's like, so if you have it, you're going to use it. And if I have to drive 3 hours to use it, God damn it, I'm going to drive and I'm going to use this because I love ice climbing, And so I think that's one thing is, hoping it's going to be kind of the, if you build it, they'll come. And that's kind of what we did when we built a climbing gym in this town. Waltopia was like, the square footage you're putting out here is way too big for your population. But we were kind of like, well, once we build it, the population of climbers are going to grow. And I think the same thing with for the ice park. And for me, one of the things I really want to see out of having an ice park, I'm selfish and I want to have really good ice right in town, but I want to see our outdoor recreation economy grow in this town, which means my property values will go up and maybe somebody will open a really good restaurant or a brew pub because of that community growing. And so that's kind of the secondary thing that I really want to see here too is, we have great fat biking, we have amazing Nordic skiing. If we can have great ice climbing and snowshoeing, all of a sudden people, for a weekend might want to come here, and hang out and listen to good music. I mean, we have an amazing music scene. So it's kind of hoping that it'll just be another factor that brings people here. Yeah,
because you were saying too that you're sort of inserting this idea into maybe something else that you're seeing going on in Winona. And again, to describe Winona, it's a river town, it's old.
Yeah.
And I just pulled into town. It just drove kind of one way down.
Yeah.
I haven't been around town, but it's definitely an old town.
Yeah, it's a crusty river town.
Yeah,
it's cool.
But you've got a university at least.
We have 2 universities and a technical college.
Okay, so you've got at least some young population, which are people to bring into the sport.
Yeah, and we have an amazing art museum that's loaded with Van Gogh and Picasso and Monet and all the Hudson River, and it's just amazing that we have these. We have Washington crosses the Delaware, which used to like hang in the White House. That's in our museum, and it shouldn't be here. It's crazy. Like the art museum is off the charts here.
Is it because you were saying how there used to be
there's
like a
some
lot of
old money
here.
And stuff, and it's right on the river, and it's just amazing to see. Like it has all of the masters here, and it rivals large cities, art galleries, but it's here. It's weird.
Yeah.
And then the music is, I think a lot of really good artists going between like Chicago and Minneapolis stop here because it's kind of this cool, down low, kind of crusty river town. They can take a deep breath before they move on or whatever. So we catch a lot of people coming through. That's really cool too. So that adds to, and I think the arts and the music, that kind of arts culture community totally dials right in with like climbers, and we appreciate those type of things. And after a good day of climbing, to be able to go and have a cold beer and listen to high quality music, that makes it even better for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because you like the whole pitch, because even we'll get one of the master references into this episode is, in the old days when they first started bolting rifle, that was one of their pitches, like, we're going to, this will help the economy. And it was actually totally bullshit.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
Because you don't, if you're coming from the front range, you don't actually ever go into rifle the town. Mm-hmm. And B, climbing was so underground then that even if you bring the masses, there's still not very many people.
Right.
But it does feel like, again, along with the idea that we're a legitimate user group, and we have this political power in a sense because there's enough of us now. I think it's actually coming to the point where there is enough of us, and enough from a certain demographic to actually make good on that promise.
Yeah.
If it works. Mm-hmm. If people show up, they will go out, spend money, stay places.
Right.
Especially in the winter.
Yeah.
Because
you don't have a lot of choices.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of choices.
Yeah.
I mean, super hardcore folks will go out and camp, but this is freaking Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's not exactly.
But the other thing too about being in Minnesota is that it's cheap.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can get a pint of beer for $3. A good one.
Right.
Your yellow beer, $1.50.
Yeah, totally.
Hotel room,
they still
$75.
Sell in those little teeny glasses.
Tapper.
Yeah, the tappers. So I mean, I guess I'm just kind of like, I'm waking up to this as you've been talking. I'm like, maybe this time it will, or in this place and in this situation, that promise will come true.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of climbing over the years has sort of made that promise to these towns.
Sure.
And even places around the world, where you're like, you're going to have this climbing economy.
Yeah.
Wink.
It can't be though, and really, it's got to be more than that.
Right.
And we all know, like climbers, a lot of us at some phase we've been dirtbags and just scraping by, and you want to actually save as much money so you can climb as long as possible. But now, if climbing is more mainstream, and the people who mountain bike also like to climb. People who Nordic ski also like to ice climb, and you get that crossover. So I think maybe it is becoming more legitimate, and I've had to do a lot of research just when I go into these meetings with, regional directors for our DNR or state park folks or city folks or whatever it is. Like, we need to have that data, and a lot of times one of the big things is pushing the whole outdoor recreation economy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that it's the third largest economy in the United States. It goes healthcare, insurance, outdoor recreation.
Okay.
It's bigger than the pharmaceutical company and the automobile companies combined.
Really?
Like, it's legit. It's $380 billion industry a year in the United States. So that's data that you can't ignore, and everybody starts thinking, well, maybe we should get our slice of that pie too. So the money's there. Mm-hmm. It's just, maybe just having the right vision to be inclusive. With not just maybe the recreation folks, but the arts and culture, the music folks too, and getting that kind of holistic approach maybe to the whole thing.
Well, it's funny because it makes for a really nice place. Like, if you travel around, as climbers often do, it's like you go into these towns where there's some climbing, but maybe the industry is the thing, or mining is the thing.
For sure, yeah.
And you're just like, this place is horrendous. Like, we're here and we're going to lay low because there's some cliffs outside of town.
Yeah.
But this is awful.
Yeah.
You know, and then you go to these places that are like what you're talking about. And actually, you know, where I live is very nice like that as well. And you're just like, wow, this is a really nice place.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of funny because it's like convincing, you know, these people that, you know what, having art and music around, it actually is like makes your, like, you know, your the lifestyle is really nice, and you guys might enjoy it, you know.
Right.
Instead of like, well, we're going to bring in, you know, gas and oil.
Yeah.
For the next 5 years.
Sure.
Until it busts.
Yep.
And then they're going to leave us with like the mess.
Yeah.
You know.
And we have that here, you know, the fracking industry.
Right.
We happen to have the best sand for fracking because it's this Jordan sandstone. It's these perfectly round granules, and so these fracking companies want our sand because it helps fracture the earth better.
They want your sand,
and so they just rape the hillsides.
Right.
And you'll just see, and then we're the port because we're right on the river.
Right.
So all these trucks with this super fine sand is coming into our town, and it's, you know, a silica-based sand that causes breathing problems and all that. And some people have that short-sighted vision of, hey, this is money into our economy. And my argument has been like, you know, the property value of my home is not going to go up because of the frac sand mining.
Right.
You know? But if we develop these outdoor recreation resources, we have really good climbing and biking and skiing and ice climbing in our town, like, people are going to want to live here. You know, like, it's expensive in Boulder for a reason. And I'm not going to compare Winona to Boulder, of course. Like, we're in the Midwest.
Is the Boulder of Minnesota.
You know?
For sure.
Wow.
Without a doubt.
Wow. Boulder, dude. But it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, I have 3 kids, and, you know, our roots are here, so if we're going to live here, let's make it as rad as possible, make it the best place we can live. And if I have any way that I can have any kind of input to make this better around here, it's good for me, it's good for my family, it's good for our community, you know. So it motivates me enough to work just because of that. I mean, because we're not moving back west for a while.
Right.
So,
maybe ever.
I don't know.
Because, I mean,
yeah,
you know, like I said, it might become the Boulder of Minnesota,
right.
With the good parts, not the bad parts.
Right. The thing I learned, though, it blew my mind kind of, was when we lived in the West, since our families all lived here, we used all of our vacation time to go back to the Midwest and see our family.
Right.
And we can weekend warrior. I could drive 7 hours to Zion and, you know, have a 3-day weekend and climb a wall.
And you were up in Idaho.
You know, yeah. And now, every year, we take like a month to 6 weeks and go. Our whole family. We hit 14 states in the Northeast last year and went to Acadia and stuff, and then we'll go and do a month or 6 weeks in, you know, my wife's an elementary teacher, I work at the university, so we can take a month and a half off and just road trip.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we get to see our family in those weekends and downtime where before we were trying to
flipped.
go. Yeah, so it's, you know, I mean, I definitely miss being by the mountains and stuff for sure, but it works.
Yeah, but you have that river.
Yeah, that helps me a lot. At least we're by something that's like great.
Yeah,
it's the greatest river.
It's impressive.
So, yeah, and it's to be respected. You know, it claims lives every year. And, and it's a cool. Yeah, it's the mighty Mississippi, the big muddy.
So you moved here. Well, did you grow up in somewhere around here?
I grew up in Baraboo, Wisconsin.
Okay,
right next to Devil's Lake.
Right, Devil's Lake.
Yeah,
yeah. So let's get to that. So you grew up in Baraboo.
Yep.
The Ringling Brothers Circus Museum.
All right, so that always comes up.
Yeah.
And so I always have to give a disclaimer right away. Like, first off, neither myself nor any of my family members were ever in the circus.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I just want to get that out there.
That's good. There's a few go-karts there too.
Yep.
So yeah, kind of a resort area for Wisconsin, and you're right next to Devil's Lake.
Yeah.
And Devil's Lake has as old a climbing tradition as almost anywhere in the state.
It is, yeah.
You know, it's right
Stettner
right
Brothers and Fritz Wiesner.
And Erickson, Jim Erickson started climbing there.
Yeah.
I just found out, I don't know if he climbed there or not, but Bob Camps was a Wisconsin guy originally that did.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So somebody just posted that on my Instagram. Actually, I don't have 100% confirmation on that.
Nice.
But anyway, it was like this sort of like, you know, kind of stepchild of what was going on between Yosemite and Boulder and the Gunks.
Yeah, it
back in the day, and they were like, "But what about us?"
Yeah, always.
You know?
Still.
Yeah. Well, still, yeah. You know, and it has some of the same claims that a lot of these areas have, where they're just like, nobody knew it, but, you know, so and so Pete Cleveland was climbing 512 here before anybody.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a storied area, Did you, growing up there, have any idea about rock climbing out there or anything else?
I didn't know about rock climbing, but man, it was something that was on my radar from a really early age. So we lived about 8 miles outside of Baraboo, and then Devil's Lake is another 3 miles past it. And my earliest connection with Devil's Lake was, I remember I was 5 and my brother had just turned 16 and it was summer, and I remember he and his buddies were going to go to Devil's Lake and they were going to go swimming and hiking, and I wanted to go because it just sounded cool. I was 5, you know, and I'm like, I want to go. Of course, little brother, he's like, no way. And he drove away, and my mom was inside, whatever, you know, not watching me carefully or whatever, not that she should have been. And I just said, screw it, man, I'm going Devil's Lake. I got on my little dirt bike and I just started riding.
Down the road?
Like pedal bike.
Oh, pedal. Okay.
Pedal bike. I was 5. I was 5 years old. And I'll never forget, like, there was that time that the hit song was Jukebox Hero.
Right.
And all I knew was Jukebox Hero, he's got stars in his eyes. And I was just singing that over and over. And I pedaled my ass like 8 miles into town, thinking once I got to Baraboo, that Devil's Lake would just appear.
Sure.
Just rode around, never found it. My mom ended up driving into the police station, and I just happened to be riding in front of the police station. She got me. But I look back on that, and I was like, yeah, she was pissed. You know, I was 5.
No.
I was 5, man, and I just rode like 10 miles on my Trax dirt bike, you know, and from Kmart. But I look back on that now and I was like, yeah, I was always drawn. And then through high school, like I was really drawn to the park, and I'd, you know, go hiking. We'd hike in the boulders. And I remember seeing people with ropes, but it just didn't register at any level. And I was back from Colorado on a vacation, and that's where I finally first climbed. Ironically, I was living in Colorado and I started climbing at Devil's Lake. And so, and it totally just changed my whole life, you know, for sure. From there on, that was my singular focus, you know. So I was 19.
Why did you bail out west? What was your motivation originally?
I think it's the Midwestern dream,
right?
Mountains, go west, you know.
Sure.
And so I took a ski trip when I was 18 and went to Big Sky, Montana, saw mountains, and that just got me super psyched. And then it started by kind of funny, got into the Grateful Dead, and me and 2 buddies came up with this idea that we're going to go to Alaska, we're going to work in the fishing industry, we're going to make a bunch of money, we're going to buy a van, and we're going to follow the Grateful Dead. And I'm going to make pizza bread. And my other buddy had this like disc stamper, so he could do custom stamps on Frisbees. And my other buddy's family worked for the circus, and he had a snow cone machine, and he was going to make snow cones with optional booze in them.
Sure.
We had this plan. It was perfect.
Or acid or whatever.
Yeah, you could totally. Yeah, that'd be extra.
Right,
but,
of course.
Yeah. So, but while I was in Alaska, frickin' Jerry Garcia died, man. Just screwed my plans up,
the whole
man.
plan.
So I just packed my shit.
You mistakenly thought that was all going to come to an end, like a lot of people did.
Yeah, it was a plan that just had 100% success rate in our mind. Like
totally. Well, like I said, you thought just because Jerry died, it was all going to end, but you could have actually just kept going. Yeah. Until what? This last summer.
And still maybe keep going. But so I packed all my shit into a backpack and hitchhiked to San Francisco and made it to the Jerry Garcia Memorial or whatever. And then I was just floating and ended up landing in Fort Collins with some friends who were there and ski bummed it for a while. And that's when I came back after the ski season, kind of during the mud season, came back to Wisconsin to see the family and walked into a bar, and that's when a dude just offered to take me climbing. And
so when you were in Fort Collins, did you climb at all, or did you just, again, like kind of know about it?
Pretty much kicked Hacky Sack, threw Frisbee in City Park.
Okay, yeah, I remember you.
I was a total slacker, you know. Just, day to day.
This was what, the mid-'90s?
You know, mid-'90s. And so, yeah, but then I remember going climbing and thinking, this is what I want to do every day for the rest of my life. And it was just, that's all I wanted to do.
Right.
Singular focus.
And so you had that, like, revelatory moment and the aligning of the planets in this bar. Yeah. Which, I've climbed in Devil's Lake as a tourist, in a sense, like, because I grew up in Chicago, but I didn't climb when I lived there. So when I go back, it'd be like, well,
Right.
I've heard of this place up there. It's called Devil's Lake. Let's go. And I'd rope some friends into going up there.
Right.
But of course, we'd just drop in and camp and climb for a couple days. But there's this like focal point that I didn't know about, or is it gone? It's gone.
It's gone now, and it was a chapter in history. It was pretty awesome. It was this sweet little spot right next to Devil's Lake State Park. It was called the Silverdale Resort. Had fireplaces, and anybody that's listening that had climbed it, was a lake climber, knows about the Silverdale. It had 100 imported beers and a couple fireplaces with couches, and all the artwork on the walls was local climbers leading classic routes, and it was just like for maybe a 8 to 10 year period, it was just kind of the center for Midwestern climbing on a lot of levels. Like if you didn't know, you have a partner, you just went to the Silverdale on Friday night and everybody was there making their plans. And
right.
I had a cabin there, and so my cabin was kind of like the, dirt bag. My yard would be filled with climbers, and on my deck and things like that, because I worked at the bar. And it was really kind of the, everybody's hatching their plans on Friday night of what they're going to go and lead, or, and then the bouldering started, and it really kind of became the base camp.
Right.
Kind of the Miguels of the Midwest on a lot of levels.
And so you guys were right on the front end of sort of the bouldering craze.
Yeah, just really in about around 98, I think. 98, 99 is when I think, bouldering really started coming to the forefront in the Midwest. And around the country, I think a lot too. It really started getting popular around that time. And
yeah, it was. I mean, there was like a shift from this idea of it being this thing you did when you couldn't go rope climbing,
right?
Or you were training for rope climbing.
Yeah.
Among certain circles and among certain people, and Waco had gone off by then to a certain extent.
Sure.
But it definitely wasn't, what it's become in terms of like this whole separate movement from climbing. You bouldered, but you were still, interested in rope climbing.
Sure.
And now, I mean, this huge populace are just boulderers.
Yeah, that's all they do.
So when I say the forefront, somebody's going to be like, wait a second, John Gill did this right eliminator in 1960. Yeah. It's like, I get it, right? Yeah. I'm talking about sort of like the overall trend.
Yeah, and Gill, he did some classic problems at Devil's Lake, and that, when he lived in Chicago and there was all kinds of problems. Oh yeah. It's kind of cool. If you go to Horsetooth Reservoir, they have in Fort Collins, they have a little like history of bouldering, and they say the 3 birthplaces of modern bouldering were at Jenny Lake in the Tetons, Horsetooth Reservoir, and Devil's Lake, Wisconsin. I saw that a few years ago. I was like, whoa.
Was that because of him?
Yeah. So
those
he
were
lived,
the 3 places
that he went to, basically.
I got to get him on the show.
Yeah, he was in Chicago for a number of years, and so he would come up, and I mean he on-site soloed 10 plus routes that are still like demanding trad leads to this day. First ascent, on-site solo, and he'd put up problems that are V4, V5. No pads, his boots, just like he did everywhere else. But so it has a history in bouldering there, and then kind of the next wave came with some of the people like Tommy Deutschler and Eric Zishi that started developing the bouldering there. And then I think there was some of us young punks who started learning about bouldering. I knew about bouldering bouncing back and forth between Fort Collins, and then just seeing the bouldering at the lake, we're like, well, we kind of have what they have. There's all these rocks here, that aren't rope routes. And we just set off like a pack of wild dogs, man. We were hunters, every day, just going to looking at maps, and maybe there's rocks here. And, most of the time we struck out, but a lot of times we found just beautiful stone. I mean, that Baraboo quartzite is beautiful rock, purple, and no friction. It's like a cue ball, so super precise footwork, and it started lending itself to really good bouldering. And it became a really magical time, I think, for a lot of us. Doing anything where you're finding new stuff.
Right.
It's fun. It's kind of an adventure, and so it was a cool group of people with a lot of energy and a lot of psych, and a lot of people willing to sacrifice their personal time to go look for new stuff. And you'd get that call of like, you're not going to work tomorrow. Like, I just found this place and it's radical. We need to go, and we would. We'd quit our jobs or skip out of work and go put up new problems. And it was before the internet was that popular. So really, it was just we were documenting it. Eric Zishi was really the kind of the ringleader as far as documenting. Like, he had a little binder of all the new routes and stuff. And we tried a new bouldering system. That was the DL system. It was 1, 2, or 3, kind of like the B system.
Okay.
And needless to say, it didn't catch on. But,
well, what did it stand for?
It was similar to the B
easy,
scale. It was
sort of hard,
it was
really impossible.
like nobody's repeated it. It's B3. Like if somebody repeated it or a
Okay.
couple people, it gets downgraded to B2 or DL2. And it was, I know, and looking back on it, maybe that tells kind of a story that we weren't chasing numbers. We were definitely just trying to find the most beautiful problem is what everybody was looking for. That one beautiful boulder that stood by itself that you found and got to introduce your friends to. It was a cool, really high energy time.
Right.
For sure.
So it's kind of a classic thing where there's these climbers that have been there for 20, 30, 40 years at this point. We're just walking past these things.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah,
Every
some
day.
were half an hour hike through the woods, and bam, here it is. But a lot of them were right under our noses, and that's something I've really learned over the years. Is there's been places where I've climbed and climbed and climbed, and all of a sudden, you look at it differently. And
or somebody else does. I think it's probably
Totally.
the more common thing.
Yeah, it happens all the time where it's all of a sudden somebody just has a new eye.
Right.
And it's, you totally could climb that. I just never thought of that.
Right,
And,
exactly.
I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of that's the progression, I think, of how it's supposed to go. It's the evolution of it, I guess. Every new generation has new skills and a new vision for either what they're seeing or what's possible.
Right.
For sure.
Well, it's interesting because you have been telling me too about the rock climbing around here, because we talked about the ice climbing. And when I say around here, I'm not talking about Devil's Lake, but I'm talking about this area in particular. And in some ways, there's kind of this interesting aspect of that. While you guys are sort of having to scrape around looking for rock here, at the same time, so much has been developed in the West.
Yeah.
That we are also, at this point, if we want to do first ascents, scraping around and looking for things.
Sure.
And I literally, there's 3, 4 cliffs that I've been to that I rode off, and I just said, this is Chaws. Like I hiked up there, scrambled up there, looked at it, touched it, and was like, no, this isn't worth it. That are now cliffs, with roots on them.
Sure.
Well, a couple of those I still don't climb out of because they still suck. But a couple of them, they turn into like legitimate fun cliffs to climb on.
Sure.
And so it's like the new eyes thing is just so important.
Yeah.
But in this weird way, again, driving up here just a few miles, I was on the river. I saw cliffs, and from where I was driving, I'm like, yeah, that looks like Chaws.
Yeah.
But right away, I was like, yeah, but you know better, Kalous. Like, it might be.
Right.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
But you don't know until
it
you
usually
go up
is.
there. And in some ways, you don't know until someone sinks the first root into it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, this is still Chaws.
Yeah.
Like,
and
that was a waste
like,
of my time and
the
bolts.
color of the rock can let you know, like we've learned things like the black and the gray limestone is bullet hard.
Right.
Generally the white limestone is Chaucy. And so
but you're seeing potential here for a good amount of rock climbing too.
I think we have a huge potential here. Yeah, and we're working super hard to try to get access to some of these areas and buying areas and working with land managers. But I say it all the time, like 90% of the rock around here is Chaws, but the 10% that is here is like a lifetime's worth of development for sure. And I don't care really where you are, but climbing a 195 foot beautiful limestone pitch 600 feet above a river is cool.
Right.
And it kind of goes back to the ice park too. Like it is maybe selfish on my part of wanting to work on this, but it's also going to benefit the community too. And it's just nobody's really kind of focused on this corner of the state. I mean, Minnesota actually does have some really awesome climbing up on the North Shore, up by Duluth and Palisade Head, and it's basically sea cliff climbing and long history up there. And there's definitely stuff here, but this area has just been kind of overlooked. And again, you really have to look at it with, you're not it's not trad climbing.
Right.
So now you're looking at, drilling bolts and getting access for that, and that's a hurdle. And then, there's maybe 5 or 6 people that own a hammer drill in Minnesota.
Right. In the whole state.
Yeah,
not,
probably.
Not Winona.
Right. In the whole state.
Right.
It's just not, it's a lot of work,
right.
And then on top of it, you have to do it properly, and you have to do that with that land ethic. And I think that's something that's really important for us as climbers to understand and embrace to landowners, is that conservation mindset is really important, and that was instilled to me from a very young age, of the land ethic, really looking at things like, what Aldo Leopold's take was on the land, and we're members of the community, and bolting with land managers is an education piece. We learned it up at the North Shore at Palisade Head. The land managers finally put bolts in because of the climbers going to the top and to the edge so much, we knock that soil off, and that's never coming back. And then it exposes the tree roots, and then the trees die, and that's not good for anybody. So the rock around here, there's 3 or 4 cliffs right pretty much in town here that if we get access to, I think will be, for Midwestern climbers, I think will be really, really great. Really great. So, I'd like to see some 2-pitch and some nice long steep sport routes.
There is the Minnesota Climbers Association, the MCA.
You've just been
saying MCA,
yeah,
so I didn't know
Minnesota
what it was.
Climbers Association, and that's our main advocacy group in Minnesota. And the MCA has been doing some really, really great things, gotten even some national attention from the Access Fund, and has really become active in building the Sandstone Ice Climbing Park in Sandstone, Minnesota, north of the cities, actually buying private land and turning it back over to land managers for rock climbing specifically. So we have the ability now where we have the ability to raise funds, purchase property, and really advocate for climbing. And the more climbers win and build those really good relationships with the land managers, the more we can build off of each other.
Right.
That's helped me with the ice park here. The fact that the Sandstone Ice Park is a huge success, and the city of Sandstone loves it because it's bringing new people in. That's an easy point of reference for me to say to our land, to our city folks as well. And hopefully there's a ripple effect, and there's more communities, across the country that can use us as a reference to help them as their case, because it's the data and the research-driven attitude that's going to work with those people.
Well, it's funny because when you told me about the ice park, I was like, yeah, that's probably a pretty good way to use an otherwise useless cliff.
It is.
It can be choss. It can be like a total piece of crap for rock climbing cliff. I'm like, yeah, that's actually.
But it's great for ice.
Yeah,
and that's right where we're running. Is like you would never rock climb on it.
Right.
It's definitely better for vandalizing than for rock climbing.
Right.
But for ice climbing, it's going to be radical.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just kind of like, that was my first thought. I'm like, yeah, that crappy, useless piece of rock, because I always think about that when I see choss. I'm like, why? Right. Why isn't that bullet?
Right.
Like, it's right there, Like,
oh man, I have spent so many days hiking, bushwhacking, hot, sweaty, cut up from thorns because you know this thing, or you saw it on Google Earth, and you get, you're way out into the middle of frickin' nowhere, and from the distance it looks good, and you hike up treacherously to the base, and it's just so bad that you don't even want to stand underneath it.
It's funny you say that. What do we owe Google Earth these days? Like, anybody I know who develops now, it's the first thing they're like, yeah, I saw it on Google Earth.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's
game changer.
Yeah, for sure. Because here, and I think the red is the same way, or places down in the southeast, it's like, you're like, there's not a cliff here. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there it is. Yeah. After you've hiked through the woods, because you just can't see it. I mean, Colorado is a whole different ballgame.
It's obvious.
You just, there's that. There it is, like 2 hours away. Right. You can go look at it.
Yeah, and I use that with land managers around here and our city folks as well, that in the Midwest, when you live out west, the recreation's obvious. There's a mountain there, there's skiing there, there's biking there, there's climbing there. It's slapping you in the face. But here you have to hunt for it, and if you're a tourist or somebody not from the area, you kind of need somebody to hold your hand and show it to you. A lot like the red really inspired me to do more work around here because
Right.
the terrain is a lot of the same, where it's not super obvious. Like if you took somebody and you just drove them through the Red River Gorge and you didn't tell them it was a climbing mecca, they'd probably be like, oh, there's some potential here.
Oh,
you know?
for sure. I mean, people tourists who drive through there,
Yeah.
never know there's climbing,
Right.
Unless they get out of their car and drive and start walking around,
Right, and some of the best sport climbing in the world.
Yeah, I know. It's I mean, even to me, who's a climber, I was like, wow, this is really hidden.
Yeah.
You know, the hollers and all that business, which
yep.
I'd heard about, but I was just like, you know, there's not. I mean, we're hiking to the Mother Lode, and I'm like, where are we going?
Yeah.
And then 2 minutes later, we're standing underneath it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's where we're going.
This is good.
Like,
Yeah.
this is pretty sweet. So I want to ask you a couple things, and then we'll get to the family. But what was your path to this advocacy thing from? I mean, you keep going back to selfishness, which I think has to be a component in it in terms of like sustaining yourself, right?
Yeah.
But what was your path to advocacy from like, you were like the hippie guys playing hacky sack to a dirt bike climber, you know, and we talked a little bit about how it's really hard to, you know, a lot of times you come up against this like anti-establishment sort of feeling in climbing that can actually be, you know, sort of a roadblock to advocacy. Mm-hmm. How did you get there?
It happened in a couple phases. One was more retrospective. So growing up, you know, Baraboo, Wisconsin, that's, you know, a couple key players were from that area kind of. So one, 15 minutes away was John Muir, lived in Portage, Wisconsin, and he's obviously fairly important.
Right.
And then the other one was Aldo Leopold.
I didn't know he was from Wisconsin.
So he was from Scotland, but he lived in Portland, or
okay.
Portage, Wisconsin, is where his family moved. Yeah. And he started all of his travels out of there. Went to school at UW-Madison and stuff. And then the next generation then was Aldo Leopold, and he's kind of the father of conservation. And growing up, my closest friend happened to be Aldo Leopold's great-grandson. And so we spent a lot of time on the Leopold Reserve, and his grandmother, Nina Leopold, was Aldo's daughter, kind of became my grandmother. My grandmother lived in Norway, so and so she kind of instilled that my family wasn't an outdoorsy family, and so she kind of gave me that perspective on it, and looking back on it and the importance of the place that we were, as I became an adult, I realized that was actually really important lessons that I learned from her and from that property, and learned about Leopold. So I kind of had that in me, and it didn't come out till later, of kind of that conservation ethic. With climbing specifically in the advocacy, I think one point that was pretty important to me that made me start thinking differently was we were climbing Zenyatta and Trada on the Tower of Babel Formation in Arches National Park, and we ran across Sam Leitner, who was rebolting the route. And that was one of the first times I came across a climber that was, he wasn't really out climbing for fun. He'd probably climbed that route a bunch of times, I would guess, and he was out there, you know, toiling away just to make the anchors better for us, you know, and drill in and stuff. And we helped him a minuscule amount, but we got to spend some time on the route with him over a course of a day and a half and talk to him about it. And that kind of stuck with me, and always has been in kind of the back of my brain that there's people out there who are taking their time and they're doing it right. You know, they're working with the land managers and they're putting the right hardware in, they're doing it right. And I kind of got to the point where, especially here, where it's like, you know, if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so looking at the potential and looking at how we used to be kind of a counterculture and under the radar, and maybe there was the climbers against the land managers, I want to get it all out on the table and let's just do it right.
Right.
You know, everybody on the same page. So I think those kind of things collided, and now getting older, looking back at, you know, Nina Leopold and some of the things she installed and her impressions on me. Now I'm not a biologist. I'm never going to be somebody who's holding the conservation flag, but I can kind of do that in the climbing culture,
right.
You know, in that community, and say, let's do this right. You know, that, yeah, we don't have to have a lot of impact, and if we can really educate some of these land managers and get on the same page with them, you know, we can have really great climbing and lessen the impact, or at least the impact is proper. So it's important.
Yeah, well, and again, as the resources get squeezed, as it were, you know, and let's face it, in the Midwest, they've always been squeezed.
Yeah,
you know, because the Devil's Lake people could have shut it all down years ago. Sure. I mean, they didn't let you know, they didn't want anyone to climb the Diamond back in the 60s and at Rocky National Park. You know, it's like they've always been on the verge of being like,
right.
You know, and the Devil's Lake thing is, when a lot of people may not know this, but it's a complete anti-bolting ethic there.
It's all trad.
And it's all trad. Even the top anchors, there's like one bolt there, isn't there?
There's
one,
a handful
like,
of them around. You know, Pete Cleveland puts them in. And,
but in the modern sense, there's none.
No way.
And so,
no way.
And had they sprayed them all over the place, maybe we'd have a whole different problem.
Yeah.
You know. So, and they don't really need to be there, but you know. So it's kind of the counterculture thing versus working with people has always been this push and pull in the sport.
Well, and it's a roll of the dice, you know. I mean, a lot of climbers can probably relate. They might have their secret crag, whether it's on public land or private land, but the minute you decide to go to that land manager, you're putting all your chips on the table.
Sure.
Because you're saying, if this doesn't work,
right.
we're host. We're never going to be, because now we're on the radar and they know we're climbing here. And so that's a dangerous step that a lot of people don't want to take. You know, it's like, hey, 5 of us can climb here and it's good for us.
Yeah.
Let's just keep that. But long-term wise, that's not going to work if we want to grow the community. So if you're going to take that to the table, you know, you better have some good data and some really good backing, not just your stories of how important it is and this makes me a better person.
Right.
That doesn't work. Not with them. You know, not with people that it's foreign to them.
Well, you keep talking about how it's like this selfish thing that you do because you want the roots and you want the ice and you want all those sorts of things. Certainly, if it's going to be a long-term sort of vocation for you in a sense, you got to have a personal stake in it.
Yeah.
You know, and also it's good that it has to come from the inside,
right?
In terms of the community as well. But let's finish up with that because you do have this personal stake. You are a climber who's spent since the late '90s. You made that shift into I want to be a climber all the time. You spent life as a dirtbag, but now you have 3 kids.
Yep.
You have got a legitimate career.
Yeah.
You live in this little town in the Midwest. So can you talk a little bit about that as we finish up here about because a lot of people ask me about that. It's like, well, it's great to hear about these professional climbers that are, if not getting paid to go climbing, at least their lifestyle is being supported. Sure. What about the rest of us, you know?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about moving into that.
The everyman category.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, like, I don't climb hard, but I love climbing, for sure. I mean, there's been times where I've definitely been able to dedicate myself to climbing, and you know, maybe I've climbed some V9s or some 12s on whatever, but once you start getting into the family scene, I don't know, maybe like a lot of people out there who have maybe had a child or can go back to that first stage of I'm having a kid, is it all over type of thought, you know, like now that I have a child, I can't take risk. You know, I got to shut it down. And, you know, I definitely struggle with that a little bit, but I mean, climbing is just so much of who I am. Like most people who climb, like we love it. And it's a huge chunk of who we are. Right. And, you know, I met my wife, you know, at Devil's Lake and early on, and she liked climbing, was really good at it, but eventually I ruined it for her, you know, and so she was just like, it's not my thing. She'd rather go backpacking or ride a horse or something, you know, and so that was the first.
You ruined it by being so intense?
I think so. We had a Grand Teton epic, and that's a whole other Enormocast that we can get into, but there's probably a fair number of guys out there who
that just put their hands in their, or their head in their hands, like, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about.
But I remember we got to a point, and it sounded kind of hardcore, I think, at the time, but that was my first kind of family conflict. Was, okay, now here's this woman I really care about. She cares about me, but she's not a climber. Like, oh man, like this is a big crossroads, because my vision at that point was my wife and we're going to climb around the world, or, you know, this is what we're going to do. You're 20 or whatever. So we just sat down and said, listen, if this is going to work, like I have really big dreams of things I want to climb. I want to go on expeditions. I'm going to be gone. And, you know, I don't know if this is going to work for us. And that's where we made a climbing contract. And it was kind of funny that, maybe like my German side came out in me or something, where it was very like, we're going to lay this down clear cut, and she was on board. She's like, all right, let's start with what defines a climbing trip. You know, we negotiated, and we're like, okay, anytime you're gone more than like 3 nights, that's a climbing trip. Like, okay, so how many climbing trips?
Was this even pre-kids?
This was pre-kids.
Oh, wow.
So we got it all out there. And so we basically agreed with, I can take like 2 month-long climbing trips a year. And it can, once I go past that 3-night stay, then
it's a
climbing trip. So if I burn one of my trips on a 7-day trip, to Eldo
you
or
can't
something.
be like, I get 3 more weeks.
Right, and I pushed it into the future. The first couple of years I was backlogged a little bit, but so it worked out really well. In the first couple of years I maxed it. I went to Alaska for 32 days. I went to Yosemite for a month, and I pushed it. But then we started having children. And,
so hold on a second. I got another question.
Okay.
This is a piece of paper?
I don't know if we ever really wrote it down.
Okay, I was just wondering.
But it was a clearly defined and I'm pretty sure we shook hands when we were done with it. So
all right, so it was
it's
laid
pretty
out.
legit.
I just was wondering if there was some, like you had to get a notary over or anything like that.
Right, no.
Okay, sorry.
So you can tell your lady that we didn't actually make a contract.
Okay, I'm just kind of I'm taking notes over here myself.
Yeah. Okay. So it was good. It worked out. And then it was all on the table. It was, this is what we have, and we're going to make it work. And then we started having children, and our first boy came along. He was born in Pocatello, Idaho, and still wanted to get after it and climb mountains and walls and stuff. And but then you start realizing that, I could be gone for 30 days, but like that kid's actually pretty cool. Right. Like they're fun, and so you miss them, and so you don't want to be gone as long.
Right.
And so you start getting kind of confronted with yourself a little bit of your priorities, and I'm a pretty driven person, and I have a long list of things I want to climb in my life, and you have to start kind of taking inventory about what's realistic and stuff. We now have 3 boys, 10, 7, and 4, so we're totally in the thick of it, but I still at least want to climb 1 or 2 big objectives a year, and trying to find that balance is hard. The other thing that I never saw coming was the mental component of it. If you're climbing a wall route or something in the mountains that has objective danger, it's really easy to start questioning, what the hell am I doing here? I've got kids, and I've even said it to my wife, as far as like, it's really hard to describe to somebody that you want to leave them and make their life harder while you're gone. Like you're a solo parent while I'm gone for 2 weeks to go to Yosemite. It's really hard for a lot of people probably to understand that. And then to be sharp, you are a risk to others on your climbing team if you're not sharp and fully in the game and in that moment. And if you want to be on the ground the whole time that you're up there, that's not safe, really. All of a sudden you're a liability. And so you have to be able to kind of turn your brain off from that home mode and kind of maybe, lie to yourself that you're still a dirtbag climber or what. But it's it takes a little bit more to push. Like I still have that fire. I still love climbing as much as I ever have, really. And it's in different chunks. It's, we can't go to Yosemite for 30 days. We're going to go to Yosemite for 7 days, and we need to pack in as much climbing into that time as possible. And so I've gotten really good at packing a lot of climbing into a short period of time. Right. Like I said, we'll go to the crag and we're going to lead 50 routes today, or I'm going to go and solo 10 routes, boulder 10 routes, lead 10 routes, and just coming up with these little quirky challenges that make me get the most climbing into it. But it also kind of lends yourself to a really limited partner pool who are up for that kind of stuff. It's not statistically good to go try to climb El Cap with a 7-day window. Right. You
want to leave yourself some room. Buy the plane ticket.
Right. So you're kind of throwing it all out there. Not a lot of people want to take that risk. And so I have a few partners who understand, or they're in the same boat, and so we try to get it done, and just add another feather to our cap, another desert tower, another wall, another peak, whatever, and I'm a better person for it. When I come home, I am grateful to be home. I appreciate my family, and I think it's really important to miss those people that you love too. So I get home and I'm psyched to be home. I only want to be home after that, and building up to a trip, your mind is kind of starting to go on that trip already, and maybe you're not present, but then when you come back, I'm fully present now. And so it's an interesting challenge that I never foresaw happening, and I could really understand why a lot of people, I have a number of friends who just packed it in once they had kids. It's too hard. Right. It's way easier just to go golfing. Yeah.
That sounds horrible, but you just made my heart sink. And I think too, like in terms of packing it in, and the way you said of like refocusing what your goals were.
Yeah.
Because the packing it in too has a lot of times has a lot to do with the difficulty of not being able to achieve, the grades or whatever.
Sure.
Because we can all pretend and talk about how grades don't matter, but it's a big part of our sport.
Yeah.
To be able to climb better than you did last year, and send that thing that you've been trying for years and years and years. So it feels like that's an important aspect of like, okay, well, what are these other things within the world of climbing that I can challenge myself with besides these numbers?
Yeah. And it's not just your physical health, but your mental health. For me, at least, is, it keeps me focused. I'm not going to do, if I don't have that carrot in front of me to do, my plank and my 100 crunches in the morning and go to the gym or go for that hike or that bike ride, like I might not do it. Right. And it's like that saying, like the hardest thing of any real objective is just getting out the front door. Like if you can get out the front door, but if you don't have that carrot out there, it really keeps me psyched. It keeps the drive going. And I don't know, it's like with rock climbing, I'm sure we're all biased about it, but I just think it's one of the coolest sports because we can dream these crazy things, you know? And if we have the time and the resources, we can at least get after it and try it. Like you can't do that with basketball. Like, there's not like this ultimate court to go play on. And it's not attainable to play in the NBA or the NFL statistically. But for us, if we train and we have the right skills, like we can do these amazing objectives. And for me, that's super inspiring. And for me, with children now, with being a father, some people, like I've had people even in my family who are like, that's reckless, you're going to climb El Cap or whatever, and like, look at yourself, you're hanging in a hanging tent or whatever. Like that is irresponsible as a parent. I've had people straight up tell me that. And I don't want my kids to grow up living in fear. I want my kids to know that the world is small and they can go all around it, and that they should dream really big dreams and then try to do them and maybe even go beyond it, and I always write a letter to my kids, each of them, before I go on a climbing trip, and it's not like, if I die, I loved you. It's not that. Right.
If you're reading this,
no, it's like,
I'm
hey,
gone.
They're, just to, maybe they keep them or something, but it's like, hey, I hope this, one day inspires you, to show that it's really, really hard for me to leave my kids. Like, it's really hard, and maybe sometimes my wife, I think she understands it, but I think some other people in our family think that, I'm always trying to escape from my family.
It's the other way around.
But it's hard,
like,
man. It is so hard, when they're giving you a hug. A lot of times I try to leave in the middle of the night or super early in the morning when they're not awake, but it makes you really question yourself. But just to let them know that don't be afraid. Be yourself, stay true to yourself. Live your dreams, go for it. And I know it's maybe kind of like motivational speaker talk or something, but as a parent, I think that's one of our duties, is to inspire our kids. And I hope they. One, if they get into climbing, they can rope gun for me when I'm old. That'd be great. But if nothing else, whatever they do, I want them to not live in fear, and I want them to be able to just get after it. And that's key. That's what we're supposed to do as parents. Make them better than us. So I'm just hoping I'm a good example to them in my little part of going and climbing rocks.
Right.
That's all we're doing.
Right on.
But a little bit of fitness helps being a good parent too. The best defense is a good offense. We can still run them into the ground. Like, you guys are driving us crazy. Guess what? We're going backpacking.
Right.
We're going mountain biking.
Yeah. So this general fitness is that you get from climbing allows you to be a solid dad.
I'm going to grind you into the ground, and then you're going to fall asleep, and your mom and I are going to drink a glass of wine.
You might have a couple more years of that, but that's going to turn itself on its head in a few years as well. Yeah, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but I'm sure you've had a lot of people on your show. I've listened to a lot of the casts. It's awesome, and there's always kind of the majority of folks saying those things like climbing saved me, or climbing is so important to me, and it has been for me. It's been everything that I have largely is related to climbing. Meeting my wife out there in those areas and things like that. It's just I don't know, it'll always be something I do on some level, for sure, until I can't walk. Definitely.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for letting me come to your house and bug you for an hour on this show.
Yeah, I'm honored to be a normal dude on the Enormocast. That's Thanks for coming.
Yeah, but let's face it, what you're doing out here in Winona will be remembered. So it's not like you're just a normal dirtbag climber hanging out there. So I think you have the potential to create something special here. And most of the time when someone from the Midwest or somewhere flat, although it's, like I said, there's some hills here.
Come on now.
But when they email me and they're like, I want to be a climber, like I just started, I'm in the gym, and what do I need to do? And like the first thing in my email is like, you need to move.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm like, whatever it takes. If your parents will send you to college out here, that sounds good. If you just come out here and get a job, there's no border patrol at Colorado's borders.
I did it.
But
Knowles Mountaineering course when I was 20. Changed
that's
my life.
Changing.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
That's cool. And that's thanks to guys like you. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Hopefully you'll inspire somebody else up here to do the same thing where they live.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much to Eric and actually to his family. I just rolled into their house in Winona and very, very hospitable. His wife Amber, his 3 kids that were in the snow, out of the snow, gearing up, gearing down, running around, giving me suspicious looks. Guy drinking their dad's beer that they'd never seen before. Anyway, very nice visit out there, and thanks to Eric for sitting down. He was a bit reluctant. The everyman often is, but obviously opened up, so that was great. Okay, folks, don't forget that you can support the Enormocast by going to enormocast.com and clicking on the Help Out tab. Also, just telling your friends. Tell your friends, check it out. Have them give it a listen. If they like it, they can stick around. If they don't have to listen anymore. It's awesome like that. Cool, rolling into 100, rolling into daddy time. Big things going on here at the Enormocast. Get out there, check your knot. And actually, this BD recall just reminds me to get out there and check your gear. With or without a recall, with or without problems. Who doesn't love just sitting down, fondling their cams, throwing a little tri-flow on there, getting your beaners all working, maybe retire a few things, dirtbags. A few of those grooved out beaners, just chuck them. They're not that expensive. Get some new ones. That tatted out, sun-drenched quick draw that you bootied off your project. Come on. Get rid of it. I don't know. Can you recycle that type of aluminum? I don't know. There's all sorts of useful things for old climbing gear. Keychains. Hang crap in your shed from them. Give them to the local rancher. They love that shit. Old ropes too. Actually, ranchers love those. When I was in Jordan, every one of the camels there, because of the climbers, had bridles made out of climbing ropes. Yeah, useful stuff, just no good for climbing anymore. Get rid of it. That is all.
I'm sorry, sir. Ma'am, I answered your question. I answered the darn... I'm cooperating here. And there's no,
Sir, you have no call to get snippy with me. I'm just doing my job here.
I'm not arguing here. I'm cooperating.